Fathers are critical, says Fariel, because men tend to parent differently. For example, men roughhouse more with kids. Why is that important?
Roughhousing creates so many skill sets. The father's creating a bond with the child, so the children don't mind the discipline because the discipline is the price they pay for more fun with dad.
People think that mothers tend to be better parents because on average, they're more attentive to children's needs.
Mothers are more empathetic as a rule to the children than dads, but an empathetic parent does not create an empathetic child. An empathetic parent is someone who's always thinking of the children's needs, which teach the children to always have his or her needs thought of. The empathy is created by the father or the mother requiring the child to think about the father's needs, the mother's needs, their brother's needs. Moms are filled with love, and they want to make sure their children do well. Dads are filled with love, but the way that dads love is to feel that I need to love the children by having the children learn how to do for themselves.
One of the things you might ask is, what role do men play in the socialization of children? And one thing that men really do seem to do with kids is to engage in rough and tumble play. Kids love that. They absolutely love rough and tumble play. Gets them so excited that, you know, they get out of control fundamentally. But rough and tumble play is an excellent mode of socialization because it teaches the child the distinction between aggression and too much aggression, right? Because if you're wrestling with a kid, the kid has to keep their behavioral output under a fair degree of control to keep the game going, to make it rough enough to be exciting, but not so rough that they get hurt or, you know, that they stick their thumb in their dad's eye or something like that. Imagine that if you're trying to figure out how to configure yourself around other people, if you haven't had that rough and tumble play, you don't really know where the boundaries of your body are, you know, and you don't know how much you can take and how much you can be stretched and how much you can be thrown around and when something actually hurts rather than is frightening. And so all of that intense sort of play that boys in particular are likely to engage in, although girls also like it, seems to be very useful for teaching children about how to engage with the world and with other people in a physical way, and that's one of the physiological foundations for higher order socialization. So it's very useful. I mean, I've often noted that children who haven't had the opportunity to engage in physical play, they're kind of awkward. You know, they're not seated well in their body, and it's like they're kind of vague physically. Whereas the ones who've been twisted around and bent and thrown up in the air and, you know, wrestled in general, they're a lot more conscious of their limits and their abilities in their body, and they're also much more able to invite other kids to play. Because men are much more likely to engage in rough and tumble play with children than women are, and rough and tumble play seems to be one of the things that civilizes children. And it's partly because, you know, one of the things that you have to learn when you're a child is what actually hurts you and what can be ignored, and what actually hurts someone else and what can be ignored. Because kids just love rough and tumble play, you know, and they love crazy things. I mean, you can throw them in the air and catch them and they think that's just great, you know. But partly what you're doing is you're extending their body in all sorts of ways and getting them to learn in an embodied sense where the limits of where their limits are and where the limits of other people are, and that's embodied.